and welcome back to my channel, everyone. I'm Jerry, and so today I'm going to break from my normal MO of not being prepared and not having anything ready for the show, and I actually wrote down a few notes to try to be ready for this one, and that should show you how strongly I feel about today's subject, which is the Umbrella Academy. Now my notes. So the Umbrella Academy was released February 15th of 2019, so it's over 2 years old now. So far there's been 2 seasons. I'm talking about season 1, that they're already announced they're going to do a 3rd season, and I don't know if they're going to do more beyond that. Quickly looking at it, there's like tons of comics on it. They've had multiple stories and things, so they could easily continue this show on for as long as there's an audience, as long as they want to pay for it. So the comic of the same name, The Umbrella Academy, was put out by Dark Horse Comics, which might be a name that not as many people are familiar with as Marvel and DC. This is one of the smaller houses, but they came up in the 90s when there was a huge boom, and have really been able to stick around by putting out these kind of niche-y, different things. These kind of darker, more adult, more risque stuff than what Marvel and DC is able to put out. So the writer of this, the creator of, or at least the main creator of it, is Gerard Way. Yeah, Gerard Way. And so besides being a comic writer, he's really known for being the lead vocalist on My Chemical Romance. So that seems like very interesting, I think. You know, guy's obviously very talented. He can sing, he can play, I'm assuming he can play guitar, I really don't know. He can sing, he can do music, he can write songs, he's a songwriter, and he's also a comic book creator. So that's pretty awesome. I think that adds an interesting little tweak on it. That's, you know, because that's a spoiler review, because in this show. So let me give the premise of the Umbrella Academy. So you may have seen my first video, which I reviewed the first 3 episodes. So this is the season 1. That's 2. That's 4. Season 1. Season 1 review. I did watch season 2 immediately after, but I'll do a separate video for that one. So the premise is that we meet this group. It opens up with, I believe it's Russia, a young woman and a young man, and they're flirting, and they're at a pool, and they like share like a kiss on the cheek, and she dives in the pool, and all of a sudden she's giving birth, having not been pregnant. And we're like, what is this? And we find out that, I believe it was 47, 48 women who were not pregnant in the morning suddenly all spontaneously gave birth at the exact same time, on the exact same day. Obviously at the same time, it's the same day. But, and we find out that there is this eccentric billionaire who tries to buy up as many of these children as possible, and he only gets 7 of them. And you find out later on they all have superpowers. Now, they don't really go into that or explain that at all in this, but we get to meet these 7 characters, and I'm getting ahead of myself. So the premise is that the eccentric billionaire, suddenly dies, and so all 7 of these kids come back to the house after being scattered for years. And we learn a little bit about each of them as the show goes on. So, and as they're trying to figure out why this father passed away, but on the night of his funeral, one of the missing ones, whose name is Fives, like the number 5, because the father gave each of them a name. You had number 1, number 2, number 3, and it goes through the 7. And then the mother gives them regular names, which I'm going to go through because I'm going to say who the actors are. Even though I wrote notes, I'm still all over the place, so I didn't completely leave my MO. So, so this guy, Fives, comes back from time traveling. He disappeared because he has teleportation abilities, and they don't know what happened to him. Going to find out he went into the future and found out about the end of the world, and that his family is connected to it. And he's finally able to come back to try to prevent the end of the world, and that's what this story is about. Is I'm trying to prevent the end of the world. So now to go through the list of 7 characters. So you might notice who gets the top billing here plays a character of Vanya and Hargreaves, as they all have the last name Hargreaves. Vanya, who's played by Elliot Page, who I mentioned before, was previously went by Ellen Page. Now, they don't really make it clear in season 1, but they, well, do they? I guess they do. It depends on how you want to interpret it. But in season 2, they make it more clear. But either way, Vanya is a female. Is a female, even though Ellen Page now goes by Elliot Page. I'm not sure about their pronouns. I'm just going to say they. But the top billing is Vanya's character, which is Elliot Page. Sorry, and she's the only one who, as far as we know, who doesn't have superpowers. So that was Vanya, and she's number 7, I believe. So then you go, next character is you go to their number 1, which is Luther, and he's played by Tom Hopper. And he's one of the only ones besides Elliot Page that I was looking at them like, I recognize this guy. This is somebody from something. I don't recognize that. Same thing with the name. I kind of feel like I've heard the name before, but I don't exactly know. But Tom Hopper is the character of Luther, number 1. And then you have Diego, which is played by David Castaneda, who I don't necessarily recognize from anywhere else. Allison, played by Emily Raver Lampman. Klaus, played by Robert Sheehan. And Five, one of the big characters I mentioned, who's played by Aidan Gallagher, who is the youngest member of this ensemble cast, because when he went back in time, he was a teenager, and then for some reason, even though he's spent a lifetime in the future, he came back and he de-aged back to the age he was when he left. So he's back to being a teenager, which of course they play up because wow, I know how to say the word, I say it all the time. His age is, he's like in his 70s, I believe. No, maybe not 70s, maybe 60s. He's old. He's a gray-haired old man. And so you have this really gruff, been through hell and back old man who's speaking like this old man, but he's in the body of like a 15-year-old, maybe a little bit older. But that's a main point. That's one of the main points of humor in the show, which the show is great. It has action, it has emotion, it has suspense, it has great humor in it. Because you also have character Klaus, who I mentioned, played by Robert Sheehan, who I heard from other interviews, he actually has an Irish accent, I believe, so I think he might be Irish. It was always interesting when I hear the people, the actors who have different accents. So it always kind of throws me a little bit. But his character there's a different, who can, oh man, what's the word? Not just see, but it's initially where he can just see and interact with dead people, but conjure. So you can conjure dead people. But that's a lot of humor in that as well, because he was completely weighed down by his powers. He was freaked out all the time by seeing all these dead people. It scared him. So he turned to drugs and alcohol, which is very dark, and he does a lot of dark things with it. But they're able to play it as like silly and light to where it doesn't feel too bad, which is good because there's so much heavy material in this. Because of the family dynamic of that they were really abused as kids, and then more of the plot that we find out a new character who I didn't write down their information, but who's a major catalyst for the story. 2 other characters I want to mention that are almost like a side story for them, which is interesting because they feel like they should be more central to the plot, but they're really not as much as you would think. Is 2 assassins who are sent to go after and kill Fives, who we find out later was working for a time police basically, and but he like broke rank and went back to his time to try to stop the apocalypse. And so it's Cha Cha, played by Mary J. Blige, the next big name after Elliot Page, and the other character is Hazel, played by Cameron Brighton, who looks familiar, but I don't necessarily think he is from anything that I know. But anyway, the acting in this is amazing. The story is amazing, and each episode as it goes, I just kept finding myself wanting to watch more and more. And when you first watch the first episode, I'm the kind of person I don't tend to binge it all at once. I'll watch 1, maybe 2 episodes, and usually that's enough. This one, there were multiple times where I was watching like 3-4 episodes. When I had the time, I was watching as many episodes as I could. because the cliffhangers are so good, and the story is so good, and the acting and characters, and it takes turns everywhere you're going. Now, I guess since I said this is spoilers, I can go ahead and spoil the end for this. So one of the big spoilers, which I kind of saw coming, is that Vanya, Elliot Page, who the first half of the series is like, oh, she doesn't have powers, they always put her down. So we find out she is the most powerful of them, and the father was afraid of her powers, so he basically wiped her memory of it and suppressed her powers and kept her on medication to keep her powers under check. And then she finds out what it is, and she's the catalyst for the apocalypse, which they go into more in the second season. But so that is very cool, very interesting, and it's, I kind of saw it, I did and didn't see it coming. Like, I knew obviously she must have had some kind of powers or abilities, or somehow she was a part of the apocalypse, because just, you know, knowing stories, story structure, knowing, you know, those types of things, obviously to me what that was. So that was excellent. This video is starting to get a little bit long for me. I tend to keep them fairly short. Other things I did want to mention though. Okay, so the season 1, it was only 10 episodes long. It felt bigger, it felt longer, but then again, I guess 10 episodes is a decent amount. But it was 10 episodes long, every episode golden. There wasn't a single episode that I was like, well, that was kind of filler, or that let me down. It wasn't. Even like when they had a big cliffhanger and then the next episode didn't immediately go pick up where that left off, it went like side for a minute. Even those still felt great, because there were still good stories and good side quests. And it picked up right then. Once it got to back to the main story, it still picked up and filled in that cliffhanger, and then went on to the next thing. And they never felt forced, or well, not forced. They never felt like cheap, like some other shows have. Okay, those actually were my very brief notes. So I'm going to also do a video for season 2 of this as well, which, like I said, I watched the first season immediately in the second season. I'm going to try to take a break, do this video, and then watch the next one, but it's just so good I couldn't stop. And I've really liked these characters, and they've fallen for the characters, and even ones that I wasn't as into in the first season, I cared a lot more about in the second season, because they were able to lean into those more, because you didn't have to tell the history and, you know, set up the relationships that the first season had to do. There's a lot of heavy lifting with an ensemble cast like this, and that has to be done in that first season, and really within the first handful of episodes, to get the emotional payoff in the later episodes. And this did an excellent job of doing that. It gave you bits and pieces, but didn't tell you everything. And one of the big things that you see, a spoiler on this, which I realize he's not even mentioned in my little notes, is that there's a member in here whose name is Ben, the character's name is Ben, who is dead. And we don't find out anything really about Ben other than his superpowers, or that he's like shoots out tentacles that he can control from like his chest. And he's a pretty big, tough guy. But Klaus, who can see dead people and commune with dead people, is followed around by his brother, and they have funny interactions, a good comedy duo throughout the whole show. And I think that's a character I forgot to mention. So like, we don't even find out anything about him in this, just that he's there and that he's always been with his brother since his death. And so that's very cool. In the second season, we learned a little bit more about that. Not a little bit, we learn more about him. So that's very cool, but I won't get into that, so I forgot to mention him. Anyway, my point is that they give you bits and pieces of a lot of stuff, enough to make you learn about the characters, but not like spoon feed it to you, or like read you from a sheet, you know, of like, here's a bio of Luther, here's a bio of Allison. They give you enough of all of it. So really great show. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Of course, not for kids. I don't think there's any nudity in it, but there's pretty graphic violence. And the subject matter of it is very high, like, you know, the apocalypse. There is, like I said, drug, alcohol use. There is, you know, parental abuse in it. So there's a lot of heavy stuff in there. So not for children, but anyway, an excellent show. Tell me what you think of season 1. I'll be coming back with season 2 shortly. Please like my video, subscribe, ring that bell, comment, all that. I love to hear from anybody. All right, until next time, I'm Jerry. Thank you very much. See ya.